Welcome to Context TV. Today on Business Battleground, we're going to look at Article 13, which is the EU's attempt to crush the big tech platforms. Now, make no mistake about it. Article 11, the link tax, and Article 13 are basically two rules that the EU has decided to push forward and adopt as a straight-up counter against the dominance of big internet technology platforms. What corporations in the EU could not accomplish through the marketplace, they're trying to accomplish now through regulation. But not so fast. The same way that Google, Facebook, Craigslist, and many of these platforms have managed to totally destroy the competition and emerge as leaders in the advertising-supported marketplace, the same could be said in Europe, where publishers, magazines, and TV companies are under assault as consumers shift from traditional media to the internet. Now, what's behind all this? The internet as we know it today is possible because of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. The DMCA provides 4 safe harbors to technology companies that are basically allowing users to upload whatever they want without any consequence to the platform in question. Now, where things get dicey is if anybody, for any reason, usually copyright or encroachment on one's privacy, tells these platforms that that content is violating one right or another of theirs, then the technology platform has to take that down. If they take it down, the technology platform is essentially indemnified. If they don't, and there's a number of reasons why, then they are exposed to damages. So what does this all mean? If you go over the history of the internet, you've basically seen content populate these platforms, much of which has been uploaded and created by users. Most of that content is basically UGC, a picture of your dog, a video of you and your daughter. But some of it is uploaded that does not belong to them. YouTube in particular is ground zero for such content. The first time that a video like Lazy Sunday by NBC's SNL went up, it wasn't necessarily somebody at NBC that uploaded that video. What the DMCA provided YouTube was a safe harbor that NBC could not sue YouTube. Replicate this over thousands, millions, and billions of pieces of content, and you have these platforms that today have swallowed up the attention and mindshare online. As consumers spend more and more time on these platforms and less time on these traditional media companies' websites, then they also garner the lion's share of the ad market. Today, what's happened is companies like Google and Facebook account for up to 80% of ad dollars, draining resources from traditional media companies who complain that their production, be it news or movies and TV shows, are expensive to produce. But here's the catch. Traditional media companies made a decision, mainly through economic determinism or lack of incentive thereof, not to publish aggressively on the internet. So traditional media companies, in fact, created this vacuum that allowed these big tech platforms to come and serve the voracious appetite of content amongst consumers. Because they were slow then to adapt and react and catch up for lost time, then government stepped in, obviously pushed by lobbyists, and introduced Article 11, which is a link tax, and Article 13, which basically is a filter requirement that users cannot upload content to which they own the rights to upload. Now, Article 11, which I don't want to expand on too much, is basically that if Google News decides to run an excerpt from, let's say, Axel Springer's website, then the EU now says that Google must compensate Axel Springer. Now, what's really weird is back in the day, there was a similar thing that was passed in Spain, and Google News decided to say, you know what, here's a one-finger salute, we're just going to not make Google News available. What happened? Here's what happened. Websites belonging to Spanish news organizations saw a loss of traffic. In effect, they hurt themselves. So they basically capitulated. If you fast forward to today, what the EU is hoping is that Google and Facebook are going to open up their wallets and give money to the news organizations. It's not going to happen. Now, if you turn the page and look at Article 13, Article 13 basically says that you can't upload content to which you don't have the rights to, right? This is why some people are afraid that it's the death of memes. Now, policymakers decided to make exemptions for memes, and as you can imagine, once you start to apply this theoretical, philosophical policy into the real world, there will be other exemptions made. Now, what does this all mean? The EU essentially proposed, voted, modified, and finally adopted a piece of regulation that is not necessarily binding law. What it means, in fact, is that each country that is part of the EU can look at the law and decide to interpret and adopt it in a given way while respecting the overall framework. They also have 24 months to implement this. Now, what can Google and Facebook and others do? There are a lot of ways to circumvent this. Now, some don't necessarily respect the spirit of the law, but gives them an opening and a back door. For one thing that YouTube needs to consider is that up to now, they've wanted to benefit from the 4 safe harbors of the DMCA, meaning they're a UGC platform, but benefit from the veneer of saying that they also host professionally produced content, such as content from WatchMojo, Context TV, and many others. So what YouTube could finally do is provide a dual class structure. After all, if YouTube is no longer a UGC platform or only a UGC platform, then it doesn't necessarily automatically require the DMCA safe harbors, ergo, Article 13 is not necessarily applicable to it. Now, it's worth noting that the DMCA is an American construct, whereas Article 13 is an EU construct, so already we're talking about different jurisdictions. Another idea, which is a bit wonky, is these apply to platforms that allow anybody to come along and upload, right? One thing that producers have long tried to do is get people to watch these videos not on YouTube but their own website. Article 13 does not really apply, as it's strictly interpreted, to owned and operated websites such as Wall Street Journal, People.com, or WatchMojo.com. So this creates an opening for producers of video content to upload content that includes third-party footage, such as if you're doing a review of a movie or you're commenting on a song. Even if you are protected by fair use or fair dealing in the UK, the filters could, in theory, prevent you from uploading that content. Now, what Article 13 gives you is an opening to actually take that content and put it on your O&O and use the platforms to promote the video on your website, because your website will not actually be required to follow the same restrictions as these UGC platforms are. I could go on. The point is, Article 11, but especially Article 13, create far more questions than they solve problems. And that's not it. I was talking to a German-based company and their executives, and I said in passing, I know how much German media companies despise Google, and they all laughed. But when I said that, is that a reason why Article 13 will be applied and like a hammer is going to be used to crush Google in some of these markets? They said, no, it's actually not that obvious. I said, why? They said, users here love Google, they love YouTube. So even though us, the media organizations, have this kind of hate relationship with YouTube and Google, the reality is that you can't just enter and force users to no longer be able to access these websites. And a bit of inside baseball, in China, it's the government that blocks access to websites like Google and YouTube and others. But if here, Google itself decides not to make its website available to users in Germany, for example, there's nothing technically stopping a German user from accessing these websites through VPNs, which kind of defeats the whole purpose to begin with. So the jury's out on what the actual impact of Article 13 will be, but it's clear that this story is yet to be told. So I've covered copyright, fair use, or fair dealing throughout the last 10 years, and I actually go in a little bit more detail on the LinkedIn post below.